The meeting is called to order. Welcome to the City Council meeting for Haltom City. And tonight we will have our invocation by Council Member John Williams, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Will you please stand?
Let's bow our heads. Pray, please. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, for your love that you bestowed on us. Thank you, Lord, for the country that we live in, the city we live in. We pray, Lord, as we go through this meeting, Lord, that you'll open up our minds and open up our hearts and lead us to the right decisions, Lord. We pray for the people in the hospital tonight that are sick. Pray for the ones at home and can't come out. Pray that you'll be with them, Lord, and heal them. Go as we go our separate ways to go home, Lord, and lead us safely home. And we ask these things in thy name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to make an announcement before we get into the agenda. Items number 15, 16, 17, and 18 have been pulled from the agenda. However, if I do have the cards here, and if you're still wanting to speak on these items, you may come forward during the Visitors and Citizens Forum. Item number 1 is our Distinguished Budget Award. This has been won by Mr. Elfrink. This is for the fiscal year 1998 to 1999 for the 10th consecutive year.
Thank you.
Good for you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's been won by the city and the employees and the department heads and the city manager, who all work really, really hard to put together a document that contains all the qualities of the program that you heard described to you when you went to a conference not too long ago and you came to my office and you said, these are neat things. Do we do this here? And we do, indeed. We want this to be a document that will serve a variety of purposes for the typical citizen who's concerned about city government and wonders what we're doing with their tax money. They can look at it and hopefully understand it. It's a working tool for all of our department heads so that they can work with it and understand what they're supposed to do, what their goals and missions are supposed to be. And of course, it's for the elected officials so they can look at it and understand as quickly as possible everything that's going on in the wide variety of things that we do on a daily and weekly basis. This is the 10th time consecutively that we received it. I think we got a steak knife set, but I'm not sure who's going to get that. And after this meeting, we'll auction off this pretty gold box to whoever would like to be the highest bidder. But this is the award. There's 9 more of them out there in the hallway. I'll be hanging it up just as soon as I can find a nail. Thank you all.
Congratulations, Dustin. We aren't getting tired of this. Our consent agenda tonight consists of items 2 through number 9. I've not had any requests to pull an item, so gentlemen, we would be open for a motion. Councilmember Williams.
I make a motion we accept the consent agenda.
Councilmember Jennings.
Second.
Councilmember Quinones.
Same.
Councilmember Ownby.
Ditto.
Councilmember Markham.
Second.
I have a motion and many seconds. Will you please register your vote? Passes unanimously. Agenda item number 10 is a public hearing for a replat. Mr. Eisen?
Just a brief comment with regard to this. The purpose of the replat of the property is to allow for construction of an addition onto an existing residential structure located on the lot today.
Since this is a public hearing, I will open it if the applicant is here and wishes to speak. If you need to speak, sir, I need to ask you to come up to the podium. Okay. Is there anyone else here to speak for this agenda item? Anyone to speak against this agenda item? If not, I'll close the public hearing. And since this is a replat, we'll be ready for a vote. Councilmember Quinones?
Yes, I move we approve the replat in Z01899.
Councilmember Arp?
Second.
Councilmember Markham?
Second.
Councilmember Henserling?
I was going to second it, but we just approved the wrong thing, I believe. Or we made the motion for the wrong item.
Was it the wrong item? Okay, item 10 then.
Item number 10?
Yes,
And-
I'm sorry, that's correct, item 10.
And the
Replat.
second
Yes.
still applies? Okay. Please register your vote. Passes unanimously. Agenda item number 11 is a public hearing as well.
This is a rezoning of a piece of property to a C4 commercial district from the M1 industrial district. And if this case looks familiar to the council, it's because you've considered a case on this property not that long ago due to some questions that were raised by the council regarding notice given during that prior conditional use permit process. It was discovered that the current zoning of the property, M1, the requested uses are not allowed uses within that district. Because of that, the case has been brought back to you as quickly as we possibly could as a C4 zoning, which when combined with the conditional use permit already received by the applicant would allow him to open an automobile service, repair, paint and body shop, and automobile sales facility.
Thank you. I now open the public hearing. Is the applicant present tonight, and do you care to say anything? Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is David Reeves. I work for Grant Engineering, 3244 Hemp Hill, Fort Worth, Texas, and I represent the applicant. Again, as you said, this seems familiar because we've had this approved once before, and there was a small glitch, and we appreciate the council and the city's help in getting us back to this point as quickly as possible. And I would ask that you please vote and approve this request. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience to speak for this agenda item? Anyone wishing to speak against? No. If not, I'll close the public hearing and move to the corresponding ordinance, agenda item number 12. We'll be ready for a motion. Councilmember Arp?
I move to approve ordinance 0-1999-037-15.
Councilmember Jennings?
That would be for a second.
Councilmember Williams?
It was for a second.
Councilmember Henserling?
That was for a second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Will you please register your vote? Passes unanimously. Next, we come to our Visitors and Citizens Forum. At the last City Council meeting, we had a slight misunderstanding, and the way we handle this has changed now. If you read your Visitors and Citizens Forum, the speaker's card, you will notice the change. In accordance with the open meetings law, council cannot discuss or debate or deliberate any issue brought forth at this time, nor can any formal action be taken as it is not a posted agenda item. A 5-minute time limit will be granted. If there are several people that are interested in the same item, we request that you choose a spokesperson. And with that being said, let me go to the cards here. The first one I have is for what was to be agenda items 16 and 18, and this is Stan White. Will you please come forward and state your name and address for the record, please, Stan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My name is Stan White. I live at 4412 Biscayne here in Haltom City. And I'd like to start off by saying I think the council is wise by pulling these items, 16 and 18. There's a lot of concern in the community that this was going to seem like it was getting pushed through real quick, and that always brings red flags up. I think that the city was wise to put this off. I do have some concerns with C4 zoning going into C3 on number 16. There's a lot of council members here that spent a lot of hours on a comprehensive land use plan some short time ago, and we spent a lot of taxpayer money doing the same thing. And I just was wondering what has changed so quickly that C4 is all of a sudden not good for the city anymore. There was a reason it was put in there. And before we could ever come back to this, I would like to have that question answered by the city, is why is C4 out of favor now? I spoke to a council member last week and asked him what was wrong with the current zoning, and he really couldn't tell me. I talked to staff, and they said they were just doing what the city had directed them to do. And some of the council members say that, Madam Mayor, that the staff brought it up. And so if this is really nobody's baby, I don't know what we're debating about here. But I am concerned that it seems like it's getting pushed through real quick. Decisions that y'all make affect where we live and our lives. And I know that y'all know that, but I think that you should adhere to the comprehensive land use plan as it is written. Very smart people, a lot smarter than myself, spend a lot of time on that. And so I would just say that please go back to the comprehensive land use plan and make it clear to the public what you would like, explain to the public more what you were trying to do. It might be a very good thing, but bells and whistles go off with me when 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 things get put on an agenda all at once, and no one can tell me why it's there, and no one really knows what's wrong with C4 now. And so I was concerned about that. Also with the cumulative zoning classes, which was going to be agenda number 18. Didn't we try this not very long ago and it didn't work? You know, I think the city has a chance to move forward or move backward, and I'm not sure what we're trying to accomplish by the cumulative zoning. We did that a lot of years here in Haltom City, and why did we stop? Something wasn't working right. Why go back and change and redo the whole wheel again? And so that's what I'm concerned about. And I appreciate you listening to me, and I think that you were very wise in putting this off. But please come back to the citizens and tell them what you're trying to do. There's a lot of good people that could be home watching the Cowboys play the brand new Browns, or the Rangers, who happen to be winning for a change after the All-Star break, that took their time off here to come because they were so concerned about that. So, and I know that they appreciate what y'all do, and I think it was wise what y'all did. And I would say that if it comes back in the same way that it is now, and y'all don't explain it, that these same people will probably be back asking why is this still not fixed? Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Second speaker card is for agenda item 15, 16, 17, and 18, Gary Larson. You know the routine, name and address.
I don't know it from this side. Madam Mayor, thank you for allowing me to speak. Now, my name is Gary Larson. I reside at 4509 Cripple Creek Road here in Haltom City. Just a couple of quick concerns. I guess I'm just kind of curious why this agenda item was pulled, and I know now that I can't be told this in this meeting, but I would like someone who put it on to explain to me and these other fine people why it just miraculously got pulled. My understanding is that these items came forth as a result of a visioning session held Saturday or 2 ago. I have a concern that a couple of the people promoting it at that session have conflicts of interest and would specifically benefit from several of these agenda items. Madam Mayor, I might request that you go back, have another visioning session, ask those 2 council members to recuse themselves on matters that would benefit them and their property, so that we can get a fair assessment. Is it really going to pass? Is this worth doing? My other question is since the visioning session, staff was given a directive to begin drafting ordinances to this end. Are they still going to pursue that? Is this just a way not to have to hear any specific comments about it tonight? And fourth of all, on my assessment of this, it's these several of these items are specifically designed to benefit used car lots and wrecking yards. It would substantially, if approved in here, substantially bring more used car lots, more area for used car lots in this town. If everything was to pass as presented, my understanding is you could, instead of putting a car lot in C4 as it currently is, you could also put it in C3, and if the cumulative zoning went back into effect, you could put them in M1 and M2. That would typically, I don't know, 10 times, 20 times the amount of available land in town for used car lots, and I think I speak for the majority of the citizens that live here, is we have enough. There's a bunch of used car lots here that are having trouble making a living. We don't need any more. The market's saturated. And I think this is just specifically designed to benefit them. And I would ask that the council member who put this on the agenda call me and tell me why he pulled it off. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
You're welcome. Thank you. Also for agenda item 15, 16, 17, and 18, Charles Womack. I think you know the routine as well.
Well, I've almost forgotten because I was hoping I wouldn't have to come down anymore. I spent 16 years, and I want to leave it in someone else's hands. But sometimes when your interest is under attack, you have to come out. So this is one of those occasions. My name is Charles Womack. I live at 4705 Sabelle. And I'm not sure what this means. I know you can't answer the question, but what this means about it being pulled tonight, is this item dead, or did we just back up to regroup, or, what does that really mean? I canceled a rather important meeting tonight to be here for this, and I'm rather disappointed that we don't get to settle it tonight. But anyway, that's life in the fast lane, I suppose. I think I go back to some experience when I was on the council a number of years ago. 28th and Belknap have always been noted for a lot of used car lots, and that's fine. I think that's an excellent location for them. But it seems that once they saturate the area, everything else leaves, and that's okay too. I think there's an explanation for that. But all of a sudden, they started going up Denton Highway, and there was a panic among the citizens. What do we do? And at that time, the best information we could gather from the legal minds is to establish the C4 zoning. And that was done, and those two that are on Denton Highway are all that happened. So I think I understand the motivation for it, but I don't agree with it. We need to keep them in line there. I think if you drive up and down Belknap and 28th, you would have to agree that the regulations in this city are not overly strenuous. I believe it would demonstrate quite the contrary in general, that basically we probably need to go the other way. But I'm not too much of that either. I read in the paper the other day where over in Flower Mound that they want to put people in jail for cutting down their own trees, and I hope we don't ever get that crazy. I think it's hard to believe that happens in America, but it's another thing. So I'm not a total redneck on it, but that's a little tough. Anyway, there are a number of things on this that do concern me. There's also reference to the sexually oriented business ordinance. I went through a very emotional time with that. My last 2 months in office, we had standing room only here. We had to move our meeting over to the Coliseum to get all the people in there. And it was a real experience, Madam Mayor, to chair a meeting like that. It was amazing how lonely it got. Council members all got quiet, and everything. It went great. But there was a lot of political careers that were made and terminated by the stand they took on the sexually oriented business ordinance. And there were a couple of people that became council people on that horse alone, and when that horse, kind of died off, well, so did they. But we had a successful ordinance. We've had no problems since then. And I know you can put any kind of spin you want to about how you're going to restructure it, but there's the old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I fear anybody messing with the sexually oriented business ordinance, and I think it would be a serious mistake. There again, that goes back on the presumption that you're going to bring this up again. I just sort of found out about this the last minute, but it's a real concern that we loosen these regulations up. There's two types of people involved in this. You've got those that don't live in the city, and I can see that they don't have as much interest in maintaining regulations. It's a bottom line for them, and they wouldn't want to do it in their city. I don't like that, but I understand it. But the ones that I have real concern and less respect for are those who reside in the city and still want to do that. There's two kind of animals, as we used to say, and I don't want to be crude here, but some of them, will soil their own nest and some will not. And I have less respect for those who will soil their own nest. And I think that's what we're looking at here. I just hope that this thing died tonight and didn't just go away for a couple of weeks and slip back in when we're not looking. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Womack. Jack Lewis. You know what to do also, right?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. I won't stay long here. I had put down item 17, which was the sexually orientated business, and I had a call from a former member of the Planning and Zoning Committee, and she had indicated to me or asked me to speak. She couldn't be here tonight. Regarding that, as well as any changes, she had just spent many, many hours, along with all of you, most of you, some out in the audience, on reviewing the present zoning ordinance. Many dollars, many man-hours spent. And then we see all these changes, so she was concerned, and I am too, and others are. But the sexually orientated business, I thought too, for those of you who take the art magazine, they just devote a full issue to sex, and I didn't know if it was related to that. So anyway, I wanted to put in my 2 bits on leaving that alone. It has worked. So
What magazine?
oh, you can't get it. You're too young. Modern Maturity. A whole deal. It's the first time, you know, it's in the paper today, but I get the magazine. I'm over 40, you know. But anyway, it's a whole, the front page. I mean, y'all ought to go out and buy one. Or I'll sell you mine. Anyway, but no, we do not, seriously, we do not need any more of this, and it has worked. And these other little items, I didn't know the details of them, seeming to work, but her main concern was, hey, we just got through working on this thing, and the ink's not dry, and here we are all making some major changes. So I just wanted to state her and my opposition to changing something that is working, and continue to move forward. Our city, as you know, we're looking at a possible tax increase if the citizens vote in, or if it gets to the citizens. So we need to remain progressive. We got a lot of land to develop. Our even back when I was there, this 10 years ago, it was reviewed and changed, looking at the future. So I hope we can all look at the future and work together, not only on the areas that are being discussed, but also other areas. So we thank all for your time and effort on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Lanford. Name and address for the record,
Good
please,
evening,
Bill.
Madam Mayor. My name is Bill Lanford. I live at 2901 Haltom Road, and I know I'm scheduled to speak on the items 15 through 18. Actually, my concerns were mostly 15, 16, and 18. And I'd like to sound hopefully a conciliatory note here tonight. Maybe it would be wise for you to tell me where I've come from philosophically. I don't know when you know you have enough car dealers until some of them start peeling out and not selling cars anymore. I mean, the market will tell me when there's too many car dealers out there. So I don't particularly worry about that too much. I do worry about a car lot of them that wouldn't pass inspection, you know, and got 3 flat tires. That kind of concerns me a little bit. But in terms of actually decide what kind of business we're going to be in here in Haltom City. If a person comes in here and wants to sell used cars, that's fine. I don't have any issues with that. The 3 things I was concerned about: the conditional use permit, for starters, that's a significant issue there. I'm sure you all know, and as well as legal non-conforming. And my main concern was that these are 2 items which actually serve to buffer between the competing interest of residents, those who own residential property, and commercial interest, those who own commercial property. Those are fairly recognizable competing interests. And you know, I'm a residential owner, and I want good businesses in the city of Haltom City. I don't want business to disappear. I think it's important to broaden our tax base in that way. And so I have a real deep concern that businesses like Haltom City and that they want to stay. And I have obviously a concern that residents like Haltom City and that their property value is not being diminished. And the conditional use permit and legal non-conforming are 2 different tax of actually serving as a buffer. In particular, the legal non-conforming. That's without that, the comprehensive land use plan that we have is actually worthless. I mean, the whole idea of that is to say we have a dynamic situation as we go through time here, and things will change, and as they do, it's not right and it's not fair just to come up and pull the rug out from under people that have invested a lot of money and time in building their business. And I think it's just real important that we not lose sight of that. And finally, the cumulative zoning classes, that in essence, as I read it, that's pretty much what we have now. We do have a fairly stacked series there where generally one thing you can do in one zone you can do in another. And as a final matter, and I hope this is something that is recognized, and I assume it was by the council. I was told today that staff has actually in the planning stages something that would make car sales a permitted use in the C3 district, and I certainly could consider that as a citizen. I don't have any. That doesn't set off red bells for me, and I think it would go a long way toward resolving some, perhaps all, and certainly some of the issues that may be lying behind some of these things here that were pulled from the agenda. And I thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Bill Worthington? I saved you till last because you have two separate items here, and I didn't want to make you walk up here twice.
Thank you.
State your name and address, please.
Wait just a minute. Let me turn off my own speaker here. I'm getting feedback. My name is Bill Worthington. I live at 2020 Elton Road. And I have two items that I wanted to address. One is how many handicap parking places does this city hall have? Do you know?
3, perhaps?
Where? There's one. And the sign is over one and points in 2 directions.
Right.
The handicap thing on the pavement's all wore out. Tonight there was a red pickup without any handicap thing parked in one of them, but it was so far away from the sign I could see why the guy didn't realize. And the pavement sign was just not there. I believe that the state law requires on public facilities to have so many handicap spots for the number of seats capacity. So I wish that the city would look into that.
Yes, sir, we will.
Okay, that's my personal problem. The other items that I wanted to discuss with you were the items 15, 16, and 18 primarily. The term here is used conditional use permit. The term that's in your zoning ordinance does not say anything about a conditional use permit. It says conditional uses and permitted uses. Permitted uses are those which are stated in each of these categories or districts, as they're called, that are permitted because they're in there and show that they're permitted. Conditional uses, then, are those that have to be approved by not only the Planning and Zoning Commission, but by the City Council. And so I found at the meeting that we had the other night that there was a lot of confusion, especially among the audience and even other people, that the fact that they were using the terminology conditional use permit here, it was being confused with permitted uses as stated in the ordinance. Conditional use, I think, as applied in the present ordinance is really needed. It's worked well. Now, I'm one of those guys that someone was talking about a while ago. I spent many years and lots of time in the Planning and Zoning Commission. I was on the Planning and Zoning Commission for 9 years when we were using Ordinance 610. That was first written in 1968. I've been on the Planning and Zoning Commission this time when we were using I believe it was ordinance 153 or something like that, 143, somebody else. And we rewrote it, and we also came up with conditional use, or the comprehensive land use plan, which took an awful lot of work. And those of you who were on the council at that time, and especially had to do with the budget, you know it took a lot of money. Dan Boutwell and Associates got rich off of that, along with the rezoning that took place, city initiated rezoning that took place. I think that we need to follow the comprehensive land use plan insofar as we can. Now that leads to the next thing here, the legal nonconforming. Legal nonconforming, had the city not had legal nonconforming, it could have initiated rezoning all over town, whether the people liked it or not. What happened after the comprehensive land use plan came into effect, the city elected to rezone undeveloped property that was not conforming to the comprehensive land use plan. It was successful. We had many public hearings. As many of you know, there again, we spent many hours, even longer than some of your sessions here. I believe Tom was on some of that, and he can affirm that. Legal nonconforming says that a person's property is okay the way it is now, even though the ordinance has been changed, until it changes hands or until it's not been occupied for 6 months. If that's the case, then he has to come back through to try to bring it up to snuff. It's the same way, of course, it is with trying to get a certificate of occupancy, abiding by the electric code, plumbing code, and all this sort of thing. I don't think you want to change that. You will have people up in arms if I have to rewire my house just because of new code. And the last is the cumulative zoning. We have had cumulative zoning. 610 had cumulative zoning, and I believe the previous one had partial cumulative zoning. We discussed that at great length when we were coming up with this current ordinance. And it was decided that the districts should stand on their own. There is cumulative zoning within industrial, and there is some cumulative zoning of permitted uses. Keep in mind, permitted uses between commercial and industrial. If you have not read this ordinance recently, please go through the different districts and you will see it says nothing in there about conditional use permits. It says permitted uses and conditional uses. All right. It is the zoning in certain districts are
Time's running short.
Can I wind it up?
Can you wind it up?
Yep. The ordinance says that the certain districts are cumulative of permitted uses. And I think that what some people want to do is to make it totally cumulative. So there are some districts that have cumulative, some districts that have conditional uses that you don't want to see in a larger district. I don't think you want a mom and pop bread shop in an industrial district, and that's what you would get. Thank you for listening.
We thank you. The next agenda item will be announcements and events. Council members, do you have announcements? Councilmember Williams?
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to comment on our 50th anniversary Golden Girl Beauty Pageant Saturday night, won by Bertha Roden. We had 9 lovely ladies that entered the contest. For those of y'all that didn't get to go to it, we had it over the old Shannon Center, and everybody there had a real good time. And Bertha was really excited over winning, and I'm proud of every lady that got in and entered on it. And I'm also proud of the 50th anniversary committee that did it, which was that particular event was headed by Diane McGee. She had some very top-rate people there. She had Miss Texas there, and I think a good time was had by all that was there. And we're very proud of Bertha and very proud of our committee. And I also want to remind the citizens, this is the 9th of August. This coming weekend, the 13th of August, we're going to meet at the Senior Citizen Center about 5 p.m. and start preparing the center for a major facelifting the next morning, the 14th of August. And we're inviting all the volunteers that we can get to come down and help us. We're going to paint the inside, the outside. We're going to hang some new drapes. And we're going to provide food, water, hot dogs, hamburgers, and if you got your newspaper, your Haltom City News in the mail Friday or Saturday, it said that the council persons would be donating money to that. And I'm going to start off by passing you my check to go toward that. And we have a local, not a business right here locally, but a business right very close by that has donated 20 gallons, and I'll let Council Member Markham bring them up if he knows who they are.
It's my understanding. It's my understanding that I guess it's all right to say who it is. Home Depot and City of North Richland Hills donated 20 gallons of paint, and it's up to the volunteers who volunteered to buy the paint to buy the rest of it. But we do need money for rollers and brushes and plastic, everything that goes with painting.
Everyone that wants to donate their check.
I'm getting a lot of checks here. Do I have to pass them on?
Madam Mayor, I think I picked the right night to bring this up.
I think you did.
But we still have three other councilmen that have agreed to whatever Mr. Bob McIntyre has helped forge my name.
Mr. Williams, the city secretary says that it would be better if you signed the back of it.
Well, I was hoping I might get it back that way.
Are you going to match these, John?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. We'll be glad to match them if you'd like us to.
We'll match them.
Okay.
Matter of fact, you brought that up. Us three councilmen will match the checks.
Does that conclude your announcement? Do you want to ask for a show of hands before you?
I'd like to know how many of you are planning on being there Saturday. Friday's not as important as Saturday. If y'all come Saturday, we'll guarantee you we'll send you home full and wore out. And it'll be something you can really be proud of. Bobby Arthur at the Senior Citizen Center is looking very forward to this, and our senior citizen serves our city as well as some surrounding cities, and they're very proud of their establishment they have down there, and I'm very proud to have them in our city.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Excuse me, would you come to the podium? Does this have to do with the senior center?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
The time, you indicated 5 p.m.
5 p.m. on Friday evening.
Oh, okay, Friday afternoon.
Friday.
Okay.
Come on up about 5 in the morning. We'll meet up there and we'll take care of some stuff. 5 p.m. Friday evening.
That's to do sort of the
13th.
make ready, Jack.
It's a prep deal, and then 8 a.m. Saturday morning.
Councilmember Henserly?
Yes, I'd like to make an announcement and just say a thanks to all those that participated last Tuesday night, August 3rd, in Haltom City's participation in the National Night Out. We had about 23 to 25 groups around the city that got together, ranging from 10 folks to about 40 folks. Got in their driveways and their front yards. They were visited by folks from the city. I'd like to thank the Crime Prevention Board for orchestrating the event and setting it all up, and for the COP and their CPA participation, and also for the council members that participated, and for Mayor Watkins for her support. And the police department, Chief Macon, fire department, as some of the fire trucks rolled out to some of the different events. Hopefully it was enjoyable and educational and gave an opportunity to get to know your neighbors a little bit and learn a few tips about how to make your neighborhood safer. And I would encourage you, if you have an interest in that regard, feel free to call the storefront or City Hall, and we'd be more than glad to set up a crime watch on in your neighborhood, and the mayor would cook hot dogs and hamburgers for you. So I offer that to y'all. Thank you.
Aging hot dogs.
Along those same lines, I have some real encouraging news that I'd like to share. We have made a very dedicated effort in the last few months to clean up our community and to lower the crime incidents. We began in District 1, where we have community policing, and between the police officers and our citizens on patrol and our crime prevention board, we're making a real impact. We're having lots of neighborhood crime watches. The citizens are noticing and they're getting involved. It's, as of last Friday, crime is down 27.4% from July of '98 to July of '99. Overall crime is down 1.7% for the month of June of this year and 7.1% for the month of July. It's really gratifying that people are noticing and they're getting involved. And there's a gentleman in the office tonight that is very instrumental in this. He sort of made it his life's work, I think. And I would just like for him to stand and be recognized, and that's Mr. G.H. Rumbaugh. He'll tell you he's not doing it alone, and of course he isn't, but he's certainly... One moment, please. Okay, thank you. Okay. He'll tell you that he's not doing this alone, and of course he isn't, but he certainly is doing a very major part of it. And he shared something with me the other day. One of the residents told him that he had lived in this particular neighborhood for 19 years, and he had not seen so much police activity in 19 years as he's seen in the last couple of months. And they're knocking on doors, they're talking to the citizens, they're not afraid of them, they're finding out that they're real human beings. And one of the neatest things that he said to Mr. Rumbaugh was that the South Side is sort of getting the idea that they're being taken back into the city. And that made him feel real good, and I think that makes all of us feel real good. So thank you, Mr. Rumbaugh, and everybody that's working with you. Agenda item number 13 is concerning the municipal court. Judge Bino wants to report on the current status and evaluation of necessary action. Judge?
Thank you. Well, about a month and a half ago, we got together and we talked about what we needed to do to get some things caught up. I had basically 4 things I really wanted to accomplish once I got on the bench. The first 2 were the things we talked about last time, and that was getting caught up on our plea dockets. And those are court dates in which people want to see the judge, and what they want to do is they want to enter a plea. They can either plead guilty, no contest, not guilty, maybe guilty with circumstances. But essentially, most of those people want to just come in front of the judge, tell their story, and hopefully get probation or a reduced fine. That's what they're really looking for. Well, the previous judge used to set his court dates out about 3 months away, which really slows down the whole process, because if somebody wanted to go to a trial, for example, the clock wouldn't even begin ticking towards a trial until that 3 months was up then, However, trials are a different story altogether. Well, what we've managed to accomplish in the meantime is through our double dockets that you gave us the last time we got together, we've been able to get completely caught up on the status of our plea dockets. In other words, if somebody got a ticket in July and they wanted the court date, that court date is now set in August. The previous judge had cases set all the way through August. So going into September now, we're completely even with where we ought to be, 100%. The second thing I wanted to accomplish was to get caught up on the backlog of jury trials. The previous judge didn't do jury trials, period. And when people used to complain often enough, eventually they'd come in front of him as a motion to dismiss for want of speedy trial, and they'd get dismissed that way. Well, when I took office, we had, I believe it was 61 people who wanted the jury trial. And that's not to mention the people who've wanted jury trials since I've also been on the bench. Well, the current status is this. We have everybody adjudicated but for 6 cases right now. And to date, none of them have actually gone all the way through trial. They've settled or worked out a plea bargain agreement with the city attorney's office. So we only need 6 more trials, and then we're completely even there. What does that mean in real terms? Your average jury trial is going to take about 4 hours, so we need 3 more days to be even with where we need to be. And that puts us 3 days beyond those 13 dockets you gave us before, but we've just got almost everything caught up. But that leaves me where I want to be now. I had 2 other things I really want to accomplish that have just never been done here before, and that's probation revocations and bond forfeiture hearings. A probation revocation is used for, it sounds like the obvious. If someone got probation in the court and they violate their probation, what are you going to do about it? Well, the way it's always stood up until now is we don't do anything about it. We don't revoke anybody. We don't really make any moves towards reporting it to DPS, so it goes on the driver's driving record. We don't assess any extra fees. We don't do anything. So we need to start doing something. That's not something we can go back on indefinitely. There's a certain time period in which we need to get it done. In other words, if they're not on probation anymore, there's nothing to revoke. So we're only talking about those cases basically from here on out. The second thing I want to accomplish in the future is bond forfeitures, having bond forfeiture hearings. What that means is someone is sitting in jail. They got arrested for having a Haltom City traffic warrant or other warrant. They contact a bail bondsman gets them out of jail. If they'd been sitting in jail, we could have took their plea as either guilty or not guilty. If they pled guilty, we could have gave them credit for time served or fined them X amount of dollars. But bottom line is we could have got rid of the case. If they pled not guilty, we could have moved up their court dates a little more expeditiously and got them a trial and moved that case along as well. Well, a bail bondsman gets them out of jail, so they can then have the luxury of going to work or watching TV or whatever it is they want to do. But essentially, they need to come back to court in the future. Well, the bond forfeiture comes in this way. Those people, those defendants, are not showing up for court. If they don't show up for court, then we are entitled to bring a hearing on whether or not we want to revoke the bond and maybe even forfeit the bond. In other words, if someone has, for example, a $100 warrant and they hire a bail bondsman, the bail bondsman typically will do the bond for $200. If the defendant doesn't show up, the bondsman is saying to us, City of Haltom City, if this person doesn't show up, I'm willing to forfeit up to $200. Well, up until now, there's never been a bond forfeiture hearing in Haltom City. So in other words, if a bail bondsman got somebody out of jail for a Haltom City ticket and the person didn't show up in court, it didn't matter to the bail bondsman. He had no interest in getting that person to court. None at all. It was a free ride. So I've talked to the city attorney and the city manager, and Mr. Olson's office did a little research on it, and it's their opinion that we can go back as far as 4 years as far as bringing motions to forfeit those bonds. And I would suggest to you that's something worthwhile. Now, I've had the opportunity to talk to most all of you individually. I've certainly made the effort to talk to each of you. As far as revocation dockets go and bond forfeiture dockets go, it's just something that's going to require some extra dockets, and it's, I guess, up to you to determine whether you think it's worth having extra dockets over. So I guess at this point I'll just ask you if you have any questions.
Any questions from council? Councilmember Arp?
I guess one of the questions that you might explain to the audience, and I got a couple more. One of them is that if somebody does get a bond with a person who gets a $200 bond, how much of that do they actually pay?
Well, that's between them and the bail bondsman strictly. Some of the bondsmen might have done it for no charge. Some of them might have charged them a percentage. They paid a fee to the bondsman, but that's nothing to do with the city of Haltom City, police, the court, or anybody. That's strictly between them.
Okay, and the second question is how many more dockets do you think you need? And one of the ideas I think that you came up with, which I like, is maybe a docket pool.
Right.
Where we just kind of set a certain amount, and then when it gets so low, then we look at it again. Because from what I've seen, you're using them wisely, and I wouldn't have any problem at all supporting that.
Okay. Well, what I can't answer is how many people are going to get a traffic ticket in the month of September and say, I want a jury trial.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that.
Right.
It could be 1, it could be 100, it could be 1,000. How many people in September are not going to show up for court and therefore that have bail bonds down on them? How many are we going to need to forfeit? I can't answer that ahead of time. What I can say is this: there's always going to be somebody, and it's going to shift from one thing to another from month to month. So the basic idea I had that I shared with you previously was, rather than saying let's go ahead and have 13 more weeks of dockets, let's just come up with a number that's you're comfortable with, so we have a pool of dockets, so that I can plan as the situation requires. If I have 3 people that need a jury trial, well, I'm going to need a day and a half for that. If I have people who want contested bond forfeiture hearings, I'll have so many days for that. The basic idea being we have like a bank account of dockets that we don't necessarily have to use, but if we need them, they're already there. It's a number that you're happy with ahead of time. And then when we get close to using them all up, I suggest we just have the same thing again. We'll get together, have a council meeting. I'll be glad to tell you what our numbers were, what we did. And if you're happy with it, we go forward and do the same thing again. And if you're not, well, you don't do any more in the future. But nothing indefinite, nothing saying 13 weeks from now. But the number I come up with is approximately 20, I think would be good. And I come up with that number for this reason. Currently what I've been doing is having court all day, once a day. And with the double dockets, that's been twice a week. What I prefer to do is this, because it has had an adverse effect on my business. Rather than having court one day all day, I'd rather have 2 mornings. So in effect, 2 4-hour days instead of 1 8-hour day. It's really the same thing. It's just dividing the days separately. So what that leaves me then is 3 other days per week I could opt, if I was going at 5 days a week. Well, 3 mornings is a day and a half. If we multiply that by 4 weeks in a month, that's, how many is that? That's 12. Okay.
It's your story.
Yeah, 6.
That's 6.
Right, 6. So to get us through the end of the year, for example, or for planning purposes, 3 months' worth would be approximately 18, and I just come up with 20 as a round number rather than an odd-numbered figure. That's not to say we would use all 20, all in a row. I mean, we have things like holidays coming, but there just won't be the need for it every month. But when there is, we can pull, because it goes back to, I don't know how many jury trials we're going to have. I don't know how many people won't show up to court that we need bond forfeiture hearings. I don't know how many people are going to potentially screw up their probation, and we need, many probation revocation hearings. These are things I just can't say with certainty. And if we don't need them, we don't use them. If we do need them, we have them. And when it gets closer to the end, we talk about renewing them.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Councilmember Hart?
Thank you.
Councilmember Jennings?
That answers my questions.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Williams?
Did not answer mine. I've never been arrested, so I don't really know how the bond forfeiture work. I know that I've made bond for a couple of people before, and had they not showed up for court, I would have forfeited the cash that I put up for them. Is that correct?
Not exactly. What would have happened is there may have been a motion to forfeit your bond, and you would have had an opportunity to come to court and explain why it is it shouldn't have been forfeited, but essentially you're entitled to due process before that's forfeited. And that's up to the city attorney's office to then show why it should be forfeit.
Actually, if you get like $1,000 bond, probably bondsman probably charge $250 to make that.
Right.
He collects that from his client.
Right.
Does $1,000 go into the city's treasury at that time, or?
Well, after a hearing, if it's decided that he should lose that much, he could lose any percentage. He could lose none of it. He could lose a percentage of it.
We arrest the suspect tonight, put him in jail. He bonds out in the morning. He pays his bondsman $250.
Yeah.
Do we get anything?
If he doesn't show up in court?
No, that day.
Of that $250?
Yeah, no.
The $250 is between him and the bondsman.
Okay, do we get any?
We get nothing.
We get nothing. The bondsman gets $250.
Correct.
That answers my question.
Okay.
So it's a matter of holding the bondsman accountable. What we really want, we're not really out to take bondsmen's money. What we want is bondsmen to make sure their clients show up in court when they're supposed to. And right now, they're not doing that. They're just not doing it. The bondsman doesn't have to physically drag the person in here, but they should do something as simple as just send them a letter, make a phone call. Hey, you got court tomorrow, don't forget to show up. That's all we're really after, and that's just not happening right now because there's no penalty for the bail bondsman.
Councilmember Arp?
I was just going to ask that on our next agenda, our next meeting, that we put this on our agenda to discuss this.
All right.
I could do that, right?
Do you want to do you want to make a motion to that effect? And if you do, may I get this one more light first?
Sure.
Okay, just a second. Councilmember Hanserling?
Just a couple quick ones, Judge. You said we go back 4 years on bond forfeitures?
No, it's never been done before with the previous judge. It's just the city attorney's opinion that we can go back 4 years because of statute of limitations.
Do you have any idea what sort of revenue, dollar figure we're talking about there?
Well, in the 10 weeks or so that I've been tracking it, just since I've been judge, we've had approximately, I think it was $36,000? $32,000 worth. So you're looking at approximately $3,000 per week on average, just since I've been here. And I don't know if that holds up going back 4 years, but if it does, you can do the math.
That's a substantial amount of money.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Okay, good. And I guess I want to just re-verify the dollars per docket. Is it $250 per docket? Or
200.
200 per docket. Okay, so we're talking about 20 dockets, which is about $4,000. Is that what we're looking at?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Councilmember Williams?
Is this not figured in the regular M of the 32.4, the 30, whatever the yearly salary of the, is this not part of the judge's job? This is not actually the judge's job then, is what you're telling me?
It's not part of his original salary.
Let's let Mr. Eisen attempt to answer that for you.
The $32,400 salary was based upon certain assumptions that would be the duties of the judge, and those involved actually doing arraignments of prisoners a certain number of days a year, virtually every day of the year, and also assumed, I believe, one docket per week would be held. And what Judge Bino was talking about is dockets in addition to the standard dockets, just where pleas are taken or trials are held. So in answer to your question, the kinds of dockets he's talking about were not included in that base salary.
Did we fail to do that when we studied the judges? Because I know we discussed this in great length before the election as to what the duties of the judge would be, what the salary would be. And there was some misunderstanding when we did this, because when we actually did the dividing up and the figuring, that we did the dividing up of the dockets and the arraignments to figure up a price, that if we had to have an outside judge come in and serve as a substitute for him, that way we'd know what to pay him. But I thought that was the reason we'd brought up the amount of the I may be mistaken, but I thought that's the reason we brought up the amount of the dockets and the amount of the arraignments and all.
Yeah, in my recollection, council member, is that was certainly one of the reasons that it was done. But the other reason was that the council had some concern prior to the election that someone could be elected judge and in theory never hold a single docket and just draw the salary. And my understanding at that point was that the council wanted to specify that if you held the docket, it was worth so much, and it was the $200, and the arraignments were worth so much. And then after the election, Judge Bino came to you and said, because of all of these other dockets, he really preferred to go to a salary type situation. And if anything were done on top of the dockets or top of the work that was specified in that original determination of salary, then he could come back to the council and request at that time additional compensation for that additional work. And as I understand, that's essentially what the judge is here this evening for, to suggest additional compensation for the additional work not contemplated at the time the salary was developed.
And if
I'm sorry, but I guess I just assumed that was the judge's duties.
Well, I'd like to add to that too, though. These things we're talking about, like revocation dockets, bond forfeiture hearings, and there's other property disposition hearings. These are the types of cases that aren't normally held every month. These things are probably, on average, would be held more like on a quarterly basis if everything were where it ought to be originally. For example, if we can go back 4 years on bond forfeiture hearings, that's going to take some time to catch up on. Essentially, what would happen is the prosecutor would negotiate with the person who had the bond and try to come to almost like a plea agreement, you might say, negotiate a dollar amount to turn over to the city. Failing that, they're entitled to a hearing at which they might be found liable or not liable. That just depends on the outcome of the individual hearing. So hearings will take longer than people reaching agreements, just by definition. How long it would take, I don't know, and if we can really go back 4 years, there's no telling exactly how long that would take to get caught up on. I prefer to leave the question of 4 years, though, to Mr. Olson. His office did the research on that, but that's just what they've told me, and I have no reason to doubt it at this point.
Does that answer your question? Councilmember Ownby?
Yeah, my first thing I know is the previous judge that we had, I think one of our biggest constraints and the reason we set up the salary structure the way we did was because we were concerned about getting due diligence out of our judge. That not being the case now, and I know we haven't talked numbers, and I'll be the first one to say this, it's not about the dollars that we pull in. It's about giving the citizens a good due process where they can come before the court in a reasonable period of time. Quick and speedy trial. But having said that, I also know that we've given you the leverage to be able to go ahead and work and try and pull up the backlog, and that's what you're doing. Right. And I just want to point out that as far as for the audience out here and everybody else, without disclosing the dollar figure, it's been an immense amount of money pulled in from things that were sitting out backlogged for the last 90 days and for the last year.
I would add, every one of those dollars was not for me finding anybody guilty. I had one trial where I found one person guilty, which figures into that dollar amount, and that was just a total of $100 out of the whole total of thousands. So it had nothing, had nothing to do with guilty versus not guilty in front of me. It was just simply people coming in and paying their fines because of the way we're handling it administratively.
Well, I think everybody on the council here finds it refreshing to see somebody doing their job the way they're supposed to, and it still takes us with caution because of the past.
I understand that.
We do want to accommodate you, and I'll be glad to second that motion when it comes around.
I haven't forgotten you, Don. Councilmember Henserling?
I was going to second that motion when it came around.
Well, let's go back then. Councilmember Arp?
Okay, one of the things I wanted to comment on is I had asked about putting it on next week's agenda, and I spoke with our city attorney, and the agenda item is worded, it says consideration and or action, so we can go ahead and take action tonight.
Right.
So I'd like to go ahead and make a motion that we set up a pool of 20 dockets.
All right. And Councilmember Henserling, do you want to second that motion?
I'll second that, but I crunched a few numbers here, and if $3,000 a week for 4 years, that's $620.
I don't. That's not my number. I say what it. I tell you what it was for. I tell you what it was for the last 10 weeks.
10 weeks.
And I tell you what the average is when you divide by 10 weeks. Okay. I can't promise.
Half a million.
I hadn't wanted the court to devote any resources to adding it up to at this point, just because I didn't know if you'd go with it or not, and sure. I didn't want to waste their time.
No. It is substantial, and based on that and the fine job you're doing, I'll second the motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Councilmember Markham, do you have discussion? Okay, second. Councilmember Quinones?
I did have a question. Judge, what is the criteria you're going to use to draw on this pool again? Because I tend to agree with some comments that I think part of this is inherent in the job, and we've had that discussion before. A lot of this goes with the job, and I think that was the idea, is that if we have a new function, whether it was served by the prior judge or not, it was part of the job. But I understand that we do have a backlog, and so I want to know what criteria you're going to use to draw upon this pool. Because I also have a concern of making it permanent if we're going to, if we have just what is a temporary problem, which appears to be the case. You're doing a good job of catching up, and that's great, and I've told you that before, but I don't want to get locked in on something that's ill-defined and that is subject to all kinds of problems.
That's exactly why I'm not asking you to do anything more than just a set number of predetermined dockets that you're comfortable with, because I don't believe it's something that needs to be permanent at this point. If it is, well, that's a discussion in the future based on the track record. Right now, I've only been in office since May. 3 months is hardly enough time to say, this is something that's going to go on, for a year or two or more. I can't say that at this time.
And so how are you going to schedule the dockets? On what criteria is what I'm saying? Is it going to be a threshold of cases, or how are you going to do that?
Okay. Well, what I've found is that we're moving approximately, I think the number was 560 per week cases Yeah, we're moving about 560 cases a week through our plea dockets. The previous judge was doing 180 a week. Now, we're doing 560 because we've had double dockets. But even if you give him credit for twice 180, that's still 360. So we're trying to get them through as quickly as possible. You know, like I said last time around, if someone gets a ticket in the month of August, I want them to have a court date in September, and I will use as many hours in the day to accomplish that as possible. But what you have to bear in mind that we didn't talk about at all this evening is one of the things that's changed in all this that none of us had expected or have any control over is the number of citations that the police department is writing. Your officers are simply writing more tickets. More tickets take more time to handle, and more time to handle means, well, there just has to be more dockets, period. It just doesn't have to do with can we get it done in 1 day a week anymore. If they write twice as many, you're going to need twice as many days.
Well, I think, and I hate to not differ, but I just emphasize the point mentioned earlier. I think that goes part to some extent goes with the job. That's all I'm saying. I don't have any problem doing this. I understand we haven't done bond forfeitures in a long time, and I understand. Believe me, I know why we haven't too. But I think that a part of that goes with it because if it increases, you've got the salary. If it decreases, you still get the same pay, even if it drops down to less than half of what it is now. So I just want you to know, from my point of view, I feel that goes with it, and I'm willing to go with this motion, but I just have that concern, and I don't know how far, if there's no time limit on this thing or no
well,
limit.
I think the number I asked for was 20, and if you're not happy when it comes time to do something after 20, don't do it again. Vote no.
Right, I understand that, but I'm just saying that's one of my concerns.
Right. Well, I understand.
Is that these things go with the job. Okay.
Any other discussion from council? If not, we have a motion and a second. Please register your vote. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Judge.
I would like to add one comment for you, if I can. One of the reasons I needed to bring this to your attention now is we set our cases a good month in advance. So right now we're trying to get settled up what's happening in September. That's why it was important to get this taken care of in the beginning of August. And one other comment, a little offbeat, going back to the previous item on the agenda this evening was the community service projects going on. Councilman Jennings had contacted me a couple of weeks ago about painting the senior center, and I was able to announce, because he contacted me, if some people fit the criteria, you know, they're maybe lower income or something, and they wanted to do community service in lieu of paying the fine, we can make that offer to them, which worked out very well. We got 18 people who volunteered, and I offered this really to the juvenile dockets we have, because, you know, kids really, most of the kids aren't working, so rather than have their parents pay, the kids are doing the community service hours. But I bring this up now because if any of you have any other projects in the future, if you would let me know, I'm not going to sentence people to do this, but I will certainly leave it as an offer to them if they meet a certain criteria, you know, if you'd like to do community service. So let me know that in the future.
18 sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Our next agenda item is appointments or reappointments to boards and commissions. I skipped 14. I skipped 14.
You skipped
14 is to approval, action, consideration for a charter advisory committee. Councilmember Henserling?
I had an appointment to make, Mayor.
Well,
Sorry.
okay.
Quick on the button.
Okay, whoops, never mind. Councilmember Williams?
You want me to go ahead and approve this?
If that's what you're wanting to do, I certainly do.
Make a motion to approve resolution number R-1999-026-01.
Thank you. Councilmember Arp?
Well, that's for a second, and I just wanted to state the reason we're doing this is we haven't reviewed our charter in almost 4 years.
Councilmember Markham?
Second.
Councilmember Ownby?
Ditto.
Ditto. I have a motion and a second. Please register your vote. Passes unanimously. Now, Councilmember Henserling, are you ready for your board and commission appointment?
Yeah. Do I need to push my light again, Mayor?
Yeah, thanks.
I'd like to appoint to our sales tax committee Mr. Tracy Henderson to that committee.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilmember Quinones?
I want to appoint Cody Elliott to that same board. I don't have his address, but I can get it.
All right. And Councilmember Williams?
My appointment to that board will be James David Averett, Jr., 3021 Fincher Road. I've got his phone number if you'd like to have it.
All right. Thank you.
834-0435.
Gentlemen, will you please register to ratify? It's unanimous. Thank you. Everyone's here tonight, so we don't have to do any excused absences. The city attorney has informed me that he has no executive session tonight, so we will adjourn at 8:43 p.m.
Well,